Hey guys, we're here with Niko. He's the owner of Odyssey Strength and Conditioning, where a few of our athletes go to do their outside of Crazy 88 work. He's been kind enough to come in and answer some of the questions that you guys have sent in. But before we begin, Niko, just talk a little bit about what your credentials are, your experience, all that.
Sure. Like Julia said, I'm Niko Halkias, owner and director of Odyssey Strength Conditioning in Fulton, Maryland, Howard County. I started off in the collegiate sector, master's in human performance, bachelor's in exercise science, a lot of experience with athletes, everyday people, special populations. I wrestled, I briefly trained no-gi, and I'm looking to get back into it hopefully at some point. So this is one of the areas, one of my niches, I suppose I can say, that I'm really passionate about and am knowledgeable in and continue to learn more about. Injury mitigation is the name of the game, strength training, all around performance. So I'm here to help as best I can.
Cool. So we're just going to ask you a few questions, and then feel free to use the question kind of as a platform to talk about the topic.
Yeah.
I think that we have to do that because we can't ask any clarifying questions to the asker.
Yeah, no problem.
So the first question is, what is the best recovery process for older competitors, 40 years and up?
Okay, that's a good question. So number one, I'll immediately say you should probably prioritize sleep. When we think of recovery, a lot of times you see foam rollers, you see Normatec boots, ice plunges, saunas. These are all good in the sense of, there are some physiological benefits mostly with cold plunge and saunas. When it comes to like the Theraguns and stuff, like that's kind of more of a peace of mind kind of a thing. So if you're an individual that likes using these tools and they make you feel good, great. That's more of like a placebo effect, I would argue. Number one, good sleep. So if you're prioritizing sleep, I would say 7 to 9 hours. And that also means doing your due diligence beforehand, right? So no screens, say an hour before. Hydration is important, but try not to overhydrate, say 30 minutes to an hour before sleep. Anything that'll interrupt your sleep window, really. So I would say good sleep is number one. Obviously nutrition, right? So what you put into your body matters significantly. Now, is that to say that, if you're a competitor, especially older, there are some considerations that you have to make, say, that a younger competitor wouldn't have to, right? They can kind of get away with. So really good sleep, nutrition that is sustainable, but mostly, healthy, and stress management. If you're an older competitor in your 40s, I think it was, I'm assuming you have a job, maybe kids, don't want to assume too much, but all these external stressors can play a huge role in how well you recover. So recovery work, like a light jog, stretching, that's still stress. So if you think about it, more work that you're putting your body through is just more stress that you're gonna have to recover on, if that makes sense. So lightly moving is important, but not overdoing it in the sense of training. And lastly, I would say manage your volume on and off the mat. So if you're performing training off the mat, then you have to consider how hard you went on that session, how long the session was. It's a lot of work as an older competitor. You have to do a lot of clarifying and just memorizing in terms of what you went through previously beforehand. So a lot of times more work to recover than it is to actually get ready for something.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Let's say I am this person and I woke up on Wednesday morning and I am worn down. Mm-hmm. I'm trashed,
Yeah.
Let's say that there's two scenarios. I wake up and I'm a little bit worn down, mm-hmm. and then the second scenario is I woke up and I'm like trashed, where you're just like, you can't move, you feel like you can't even go to work.
Sure.
Is the recovery different? Like what you would recommend to the person depending on how fatigued they are? And if so, what would you recommend each person do?
Yeah, I think the recovery is different. So let's go with the more trashed individual. With them, I would probably stress to take a day off or so. Now, I'm still thinking of this in the lens of a competitor, right? Like when Julius and his athletes come to my gym, I'm always asking how they're feeling, number one. When is our next competition? How hard was your training session previous? And so you have to take in all those things in consideration. So if you are really trashed, and then I ask you, well, are you planning on training later today? Are you planning on doing condition later? And you tell me yes, I would probably say, A, either don't and give yourself time to recover and rest. Or B, go really light. And I mean just get on the floor, maybe do the warm-up, drill some moves or positions that you feel as though you need to be sharp in, and then call it quits. There's no shame in that. And in fact, I think this demographic and this population can do a better job of taking a little bit of time off. There's always nagging injuries, illness if we're overtraining, and the fear is, oh, if I don't, if I stop, then I'll be rusty, which probably won't happen, especially if you just take like a day or two off. If anything, you'll thank yourself for it. Now, the initial question, if someone is, say, just slightly fatigued, I would say there's no reason for you not to train. And there's opposite ends of the spectrum. Sometimes we get people that may be hypochondriacs where they're like, oh, I'm a little tired, maybe I should take time off. And then there's people that are completely trash and still want to train really hard, right? So you kind of have to meet in the middle there. If you're slightly fatigued, then you should probably still train. In fact, sometimes you might feel better after. But listen to your body, in other words.
Okay. Related question, I think this was in regards to martial arts, but I'm curious what your take is on this, assuming that it's strength and conditioning, or actually even other sports. I want to increase my training. I currently train Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. How much leeway do I have to alter the intensity of these practices so that I can add 2 more sessions a week?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're already training 5 days a week. Now, let's answer this in terms of martial arts first, right? You have to understand the number one priority is martial arts. The number one priority is your performance on the mat. The number one priority is how well you perform in competitions and all this stuff, right? If you're competing. If you're training 5 days a week and you don't have much leeway, to be totally honest, what you're gonna have to do is compromise. So you can either make 2 or 3 of those days a little less intense, if you wanna say add like a 6th day. And by day, I mean like 30-minute sessions, maybe an hour session, right? So if you're training 5 days a week, I'm assuming you're training on average like off the mat, so to speak, 45 minutes to an hour. And then when you include what you're doing, in the gym in terms of martial arts, it's probably another hour and a half, another 2 hours. You don't have much leeway. In fact, you need to scale it back. And I strongly suggest that because, you're going to be beating yourself up if you have all these recurring injuries and nagging injuries. So let me just reiterate, you're training 5 days a week already. That's more than enough. I think what you can do is sit down, think about where your weaknesses are, and maybe focus on getting really, really good and sharpening those tools versus thinking you need to add more intensity, because you absolutely do not.
So, yeah, it's hard to understand this, but I think what the person is asking is, should he lower the intensity on the 5 days in order to add 2 extra? That seems counterproductive.
No, it's counterproductive.
Okay.
No. If anything, train 4 days.
Right.
There's more is, less is more, in my opinion, with this, because chances are you're doing enough already. You just have to make sure the quality of work is up to par, right? So quality over quantity in this aspect, always.
Okay. Next question. I'm doing daily workouts and eating fewer calories. Why am I not losing weight?
So you're doing daily workouts and you're eating fewer calories. Why are you not losing weight? Okay. This is a super common question I get, especially just my clients who are general population who aren't really competitors. You're probably not doing a good job of tracking your actual caloric intake. Now, I hope that doesn't sound too harsh, and I'm not trying to come off as such, but you have to understand it takes a lot of work, and precision is what's going to give you these results. At some point, you will not be able to eyeball a plate of food and then be like, oh yeah, that's 600 calories, I'm fine, you know? First of all, you have to find what range of calorie or caloric intake, it's always a range, it's never going to be one set number, that you need to lose a sustainable amount of weight, right? Also, maybe we don't understand how weight fluctuation works. If you step on the scale and you're 2 pounds heavier a day after hard training and eating fewer calories, that's normal. That's, you know, probably fluid retention. And then at some point down the line, if you're losing weight sustainably and properly, you'll start losing a little bit of weight from that fluctuated number. You have to track your calories. Tracking your macronutrients, your carbohydrate, protein, and fat intake is very important. What are you doing and how are you eating on the weekends? Are you drinking alcohol? Alcohol is 7 calories per gram. So you have to take that into consideration as well. You have to be really honest with yourself. You have to be self-efficient, self-accountable. Are you actually tracking? Are you using an app? Are you writing this stuff down? Weigh your food. You can't be lazy about this. Also, I fear that maybe you're eating, you're not eating fewer calories than you need to actually lose weight. So number one, track your food and make sure that you are actually in the range in which you can lose, say, you know, a half a pound to at most 2 pounds per week. And I'm not sure how much you weigh. That can differ based on the individual. And number two, you know, make sure your training is conducive of caloric expenditure. But also, if you're probably doing too much cardio, I would imagine. Cardio is a little overrated when it comes to fat loss. Train with weights and say 30 minutes to an hour. Eat quality protein. Prioritize protein. So anytime you want to lose fat, track your calories and macronutrients, prioritize protein in your meals, and train with weights, and then sprinkle some conditioning or cardio on there as well.
Is there any situation where a person would actually be accurate with their calories and still not lose weight?
Yeah, I think there are, but it's rare. So when I think, and I have some clients who have, say, some hormonal considerations, right? Maybe some endocrinological underlying issues, health issues, so thyroid issues, right? Maybe, someone who just gave birth, for instance. These things are out of whack. Your hormones play a big role in that. I know individuals with thyroid issues do their best with caloric tracking, and there still isn't much progress. I would say it's pretty rare. It's pretty rare if caloric intake is on point and you're not losing something. I think where people go wrong is they have no patience whatsoever when it comes to this, and you need at least 2 weeks of tracking to make sure there is a downward trend in your body weight, right? So if you spend 1 week and you're like, what the hell, I'm 2 pounds up, like I mentioned in the previous question, that's simply weight fluctuation, right? You need to give it time, 2 to 3 weeks, to see if the weight is actually going down, and then we would actually physically graph it to see whether we are losing weight. So I would say anyone with underlying health concerns or issues, if this is going on and you know you're being precise and you're not losing weight, I would probably consult your primary care physician, get blood work, not to sound scary or fear-mongering, but it's always a good idea to just visit, a medical professional when it comes to that.
Cool. If a person is working a 9-to-5 job, how do you combine strength training with combat sports?
Okay, so if you're working a 9-to-5 job, I'd like to know what days you are performing or participating in combat sports and what days you are training with weights or strength training. So let me give you an example of what we do with Crazy 88 here. So on Mondays and Wednesdays at 2 o'clock, I have a group of guys, rather high level competitors, I would argue, that come in and they are fresh off of training and they come in. Some of those people don't have 9-to-5s, right? So they have a little bit more time. I would say you have to prioritize it. So is there a schedule, or is there like a gi or no gi or Muay Thai or whatever you want to do before work, right? Say 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours before work. It's all about what you want to give into it. If you want to prioritize combat sports, do more combat sports than strength training, right? If you feel like your weakness is strength training, prioritize strength training and do enough combat sports to maintain or slightly improve your skill. There's always a compromise. You can never have it all, right? It's a scale. Maybe 4 weeks or 8 weeks, you periodize the fact that you want to get stronger, so focus on that. I would say either strength training in the morning is probably a better idea because it's not as strenuous. And honestly, whatever works for your schedule, it should be the answer. Strength training in the morning, you really realistically only need like 30 to 45 minutes. And preferably knowing how much volume, reps, sets, and intensity weight you need. You can still train in the morning or in the evening after work and still preserve your health, your joint health, your performance, all that stuff. So I would either say combat sports in the morning or in the evening, whatever works for your schedule. And most of the time, the combat sports or the martial arts schedule is what you would have to work around. You can fit in resistance training or strength training whenever you want it, really. So either in the morning or in the evening when you're done.
So if a person we're assuming this person's not trying to compete, you would just say you have to prioritize the one that is more important?
So I would say, so I would say fit it in however you can. If you enjoy doing combat sports and you don't want to compromise any, not even a minute of that, then do that when you're most available, right? And then anytime you can, realistically you need maybe like 2 days bare minimum to see some strength results. Ideally train 3, but again, 30 minutes, 40, 45 minutes is really all you need if you have a really quality session, basically.
Cool. Very broad question. What is the best diet plan for a Muay Thai or BJJ fighter?
That's pretty broad.
That's very broad.
Popeyes, lots of Popeyes. No. So, it's a broad question. Some people have underlying health issues. Some people believe they're gluten insensitive. Some people believe that dairy messes them up, right? To give you an even broader answer, and this is always going to come about to prioritizing protein. If you are not cutting weight, or if you're fortunate enough to be at a weight where you walk around where you barely have to cut weight, I would say do not skip carbohydrate intake. I think you ought to try and time it around your training where you can consume those carbohydrates, because everyone is terrified of carbs. People think carbs make you fat. Totally not true. It's just the fact that they're highly palatable, easy to eat, and they don't fill you up as well as protein, or say like fibrous vegetables or fruit. So I would say prioritize protein every meal, and that number, that gram will depend on how much you weigh and all that stuff. But 0.8 grams per lean mass, or 1 pound per lean mass. A really good source for that is anything by, it's called Renaissance periodization, long name, but in my opinion, probably one of the better sources for maintaining lean mass or performance in terms of like nutrition of human performance. So prioritize protein, time your carbohydrates around your training.
Can you go more into that? What do you mean by time the carbohydrates?
Okay, so and I'm saying that because a lot of fighters and BJJ guys that I've spoken to or trained are really worried about consuming carbohydrates because they feel as though they retain fluid and this and that and all these nuances. If you are in that mindset where you don't want to eat carbs, say, later in the day because you fear that you'll just gain weight magically, then if you have a training, say you train at noon, right? You have breakfast, and then hopefully in your breakfast you have some good protein sources that are not too heavy, like, in the stomach, so you don't want to just crush sausage, before a training session. What you want to do is get enough protein in the morning, some fruits, veggies, maybe some oatmeal, right? Some very good source carbohydrates. Nothing that'll cause like gastrointestinal distress. So if you're training at noon, make sure you wake up, you get breakfast with protein and some carb, and then say an hour before training, maybe even 45, 30 minutes, you consume something that is easily digested, right? So it's called like an intra-workout shake, like something with a little bit of protein, like whey protein or whatever protein that doesn't mess with you stomach-wise. Put some sugar in there, literally like granulated sugar. You could have some powdered Gatorade. What's gonna happen is you're gonna consume that, and you'll just have energy for that training session and be able to get better results and also perform really well. And then immediately after training, or maybe an hour after training, depending on how your appetite works, protein again, carbohydrates again, and then the rest of the day, stick to lean protein and some veggies and fruits, stuff like that. It really should not be incredibly complicated. Stick to anything that seems more natural, that has less ingredients. That's the best advice I can to simplify things for you. I would say if you're BJJ and Muay Thai, and I know I'm dragging that answer a lot, I'm always thinking about bone density and just the muscle tissue, tendons and ligaments. Anything that we can to maintain that bone density and muscle tissue, because you're probably going to be losing weight, right, at some point. So in order to maintain your performance, prioritize protein, anything that'll allow you to perform really well and not injure yourselves.
Cool. So where can people find you, Niko? You can.
Yeah, I'll plug. So, so obviously my actual gym location is in Fulton, Maryland, in Howard County by Maple Lawn, Skaggsville to be exact. So it's 11845 Skaggsville Road, Fulton, Maryland, 20759. On Instagram, I have to check. I'm Odyssey.strong, right? So you can just look that up, Odyssey.strong. And then our website is odysseystrong.com.
Cool. Thanks, Niko.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.